Please excuse my massive hair. Before I get to talking about Manhunt and all the excellent things I have to say about it, I do have a huge caveat, which is that I did a little bit of research, a little bit of snooping on Twitter, and the author, Gretchen Felker-Martin, is a little bit incendiary. She gets very, very pissed off with other people within the queer community. She seems to express a little bit of biphobia and bi-erasure, and has even made some comments about the non-binary community that I don't love. As a pansexual non-binary, I'm not hugely enthusiastic about some of the things that she said, but this is about the book. And I think Manhunt is visceral, disgusting, wonderful, fun, gross, and has a lot of really important, poignant things to say that really should be paid attention to. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, and I've got to try and keep them succinct and in some sort of a chronological order. First off, what's it about? Manhunt is a novel by an American trans woman, Gretchen Felker-Martin, and it is a post-apocalyptic novel that is reminiscent of a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11, Brian K. Vaughan's Why the Last Man, that especially. But it comes at everything from a very different perspective. I definitely need to bring up Why the Last Man. I have not seen the TV show, but I'm a huge fan of Brian K. Vaughan. I loved his comic when I was at university. I loved Saga, which he then went on to write. And at that time, I didn't really consider the problematic elements of Why the Last Man, considering trans and non-binary people. Now, obviously, I'm far more aware of that, and I'd be curious to go back and read it again. I do own the whole thing. But Why the Last Man is about a disease that suddenly wipes out anyone with male chromosomes. The way that Gretchen Felker-Martin deals with the similar thing here is that the disease in Manhunt that has ravaged society and created this post-apocalyptic landscape is one that targets testosterone rather than chromosomes. And that makes for a very interesting approach to this kind of a theme and genre. In Manhunt, there was a moment called T-Day, and a disease that is known as T-Rex. This disease turns anyone with a high level of testosterone, so most cisgender men, into 28 Days Later-esque, ravenous, feral, zombie things. They are hungry for flesh, they are horny, they have penises that are barbed like a cat's, and they are monstrous things. They are somewhere between a zombie and a goblin. And they're dangerous, and they're murderous, and they're feral, and they're stupid. When we begin Manhunt, our protagonists are a pair of trans women who have survived the apocalypse because of estrogen. The testosterone levels in their body are low enough, and the estrogen levels are high enough that the T-Rex virus doesn't affect them. But, just like in The Walking Dead, the real enemy in this story isn't the zombie monsters that infest the landscape, but rather the people that are left alive, the communities, the groups, the cults, all of the dangerous and terrifying things that are out there. And in this, they are TERFs. They're just TERFs. This novel is pretty much a war between a small group of trans people and the communities that they are safe within, and a legion of TERFs. Our two trans women are Beth and Fran. They've been on the road together for a while, and early on they meet a young trans man who is also a Native American called Robbie. I don't quite understand the logistics of how trans men are safe in this world. I'm guessing it's because perhaps Robbie and other trans men were not yet on testosterone, or not on testosterone at all, or were at a low point in their testosterone levels when the virus broke out. I'm not entirely sure. But whatever the case, the TERFs are hunting trans people. It's a very on-the-nose exploration of where the bigotry of TERFism could end up. In a post-apocalyptic scenario where there are no laws and rules and it's kill or be killed, it's really not that far-fetched to imagine a cult of power-hungry, aggressive, bigoted, fascistic TERFs going after trans and non-binary people. It's not a big leap. So having a post-apocalyptic novel that is primarily about the fight that trans people are forced to take up in order to survive against murderous TERFs. It hurts, it hits home very hard, but it's also a lot of fun, Gretchen Felker-Martin is having fun with the aggression, the blood, the gore, the shock value. This is a disgusting novel. It's not really a horror novel, but it is intensely gruesome. One thing that the protagonists of this story do is that they hunt these men, the feral, monstrous men that prowl the world, and they cut off their testicles. They cook them, they eat them, or they sell them. Aside from the viscera of hunting down men and cutting off their testicles and eating them, there's also an incredible amount of sexual assault and sexual abuse in this novel. A lot of it. But there's also a lot of very fun, kinky, hedonistic sex as well. The characters in this book are almost constantly killing or fucking. Those are pretty much the two things that they do. There is a lot of sex, a little bit of romance, a lot of lust, and sometimes it feels very, very fulfilling. The idea that these people are living their best lives in this post-apocalyptic world. They're lusting after each other and having sex with each other. Great. Other times, it comes across as a little bit gratuitous. I've talked so much recently about some great books that I've really been enjoying that have a gratuitous nature to them. Books like Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh and the works of Sayaka Murata. Books that are shocking and disgusting, full of really, really difficult things that are hard to digest, hard to even think about. But they all serve a greater purpose thematically, at least from my perspective. This is the first time I've read a book where I do think that the author is stepping over that line into childish territory. Most of the aggression, the gore, the terror, the abuse, the visuals, the visceral imagery in this book, most of the time it seems to serve a purpose, and I can understand what she's doing. I can understand what fuels her fire, hate for the bigoted and fascistic transphobes out there. Absolutely, I understand all of that. I feel it myself. But sometimes she does just push things to a point where you kind of think, okay, you're being an edgy teenager now. You can stop. This is silly. It could be just in the language and the way that the characters talk, how they talk like they're younger than they are. They're all supposed to be around the age of 30, and they all sometimes talk like they're 14, 15. There's also a lot of pop culture references that mean that this book is going to age so badly. References to specific singers like Mitski. I love Mitski. I don't know how long she'll be popular for, and it just feels like, Game of Thrones, they talk about Game of Thrones at one point. And I think these pop culture references in a post-apocalyptic wasteland make it feel very specific to now, and I just worry that this book will not age well. Maybe Felker-Martin doesn't care about that, but I do. And it's interesting that she has, on Twitter, really come for YA authors, and I think that that's something that YA authors do a lot, is they reference pop culture that makes their books age terribly. And yet she does it herself. She hates queer YA fiction. She's talked about it on Twitter. And she said some really mean and kind of pathetic things. And yet she's doing exactly that trope of YA fiction, where you reference pop culture so it feels relevant to the readers now. But what about the readers in 5-10 years? I think the disgusting, visceral, toxic, horrific, gruesome, gnarly things that you read in this book, truly haunting and horrible things, I do think for the most part they serve a point, or 2 points. One, some people, myself included, just really love this stuff. I love horror films, I love body horror, I love gore and gruesomeness. The more blood, the more guts, the more dead things, the more explosions of blood and guts, the better. I love it all. I've been rewatching The Boys recently, and The Boys is gnarly as hell when it comes to the weird stuff that happens. So much blood, so much guts, and I love it. So that's one. It's there because why not? A lot of people like it, myself included. The other reason is that it really, really hammers home just how dangerous transphobes are. Just how cultish they are. Just how bigoted and fascistic they are. And I truly believe, as I said before, if this was a real post-apocalyptic wasteland, if this was a real scenario where testosterone led to a virus that wiped out most men, and you had trans women left, some cis women would form a cult to hunt down trans people, pin them up against the wall, and execute them. It does not feel far-fetched. And what Gretchen Felker-Martin has done is just point out that that's the case. That, yeah, this could really just happen to us. It is the only logical end to transphobia, is a wiping out of trans people. And Gretchen Felker-Martin is clearly furious. Of course she is. We all are. And our anger comes from fear. We are afraid. And she has funneled that fear and anger into a very visceral nightmare of a novel that's plenty of fun to read and also difficult to read and upsetting, and brings home the realities of living as a trans person in the modern world. So you can probably tell that I'm a little bit divided when it comes to this novel. For the most part, it's pretty well written. There are a lot of weird time jumps. It'll just jump ahead, like leap forward a day, a week, a month, and it can be quite hard to keep up with what's happening and who it's happening to. There's so much jumping around, so you really have to pay attention to that. That's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just an exercise in focus on the reader's part. Some of the dialogue, as I said, can be a little bit edgy, reminds me of the Atlas 6. Sometimes the characters just talk like silly teenagers. The gore is spectacularly well done. The way that she describes particularly visceral and bloody moments is stunning. It really is perfectly written to make your skin crawl, to make you uncomfortable, and to make you feel kind of satisfied by the violence in it, at least if you're me. So it mostly succeeds. And I think it certainly succeeds when it comes to the themes, the point, the message that it's trying to convey, that the world is a dangerous place, that bigotry has an end game, and that end game is violence, aggression, and a wiping out of a group that some people have decided they don't like. And it's also just a really, really fun book full of gnarly grossness. But the edginess of it, the childishness of the author, and the childishness of some of the characters sometimes comes across a little bit exhausting. For the most part, this is a disgusting novel that I really, really enjoyed and I recommend. It's not perfect. It's an important read. Just maybe ignore some of the Twitter stuff that you'll see. Ultimately, I recommend Manhunt. I do. If you like post-apocalypses, you'll enjoy this. Subscribe for books.